Hello, Marcel here to show you the new attachment and simulation types added to Lucid Physics plugin for 3ds Max. It is already possible to have a cloth or an inflatable object to be animated partly by selecting its vertices and letting them be fixed or animated inside 3ds Max. However, it was not possible to have two objects that are dynamically simulated to be attached between each other. In this build, we have added something called an attachment object, which allows you to connect two objects that are simulated by Lucid and have particles in these two objects be connected between each other to form springs that hold them together. To demonstrate this, I'm just going to create a quick setup where I have two pieces of cloth and a ground plane, and I'm gonna represent everything using planes inside Max. I'm just gonna go and increase the number of segments a little bit and maybe add a Lucid configuration for flex simulation, and maybe I'll rotate my cloth planes a little bit so we don't get them to just fall down straight on their face, and instead they will fall down under a little bit of an angle. So if I simulate right now, they just fall down and nothing interesting happens. Now if I go into the helpers menu and if I go into the Lucid subcategory, there is an Lucid attachment object that I can create. All I need to do is click and drag it, and I create a little bit of a sphere primitive, and this sphere primitive essentially allows Lucid to know which particles to connect between each other. Everything that's inside the sphere will be connected between each other during simulations. And right now we only have a sphere primitive, but in the future we plan to add all kinds of other shapes like rectangles or even cylinders, and maybe something that allows you to even create custom shapes from meshes. So for now it's just a sphere, and if I place it properly between my cloth object, it's going to attach them together, and this is all I need to do. So let's simulate and see what happens. So we now see that the sphere has actually connected these together, and these gray lines over here show which particles of the two cloth objects are being connected. And to demonstrate that this connection is actually there, let me move everything a little bit to the side in a way where one cloth object will fall down over the edge of my collision object and maybe drag the other one behind it. So if I simulate right now, we can see that it is dragging the other object behind it. There are some parameters that you can control for this attachment, like the spring constraint. So I can change this value to 0.01, and if I do that and press simulate, there is way less force holding these objects together, and they're kind of being loosely connected with one of the cloth objects dragging the other one behind, but there is certainly a lot more distance that is permitted between them by Lucid. The attachment object can be applied to hold all kinds of Lucid geometry together, not just cloth objects. So this can apply to inflatables or rigid bodies or even soft bodies, anything that is represented by particles. So collision objects do not apply here. Let me quickly set up another scene to demonstrate this working on soft bodies. So I have quickly created the scene with a bunch of boxes to which I applied the soft body preset, and I have my ground plane as per usual. And now I also have 4 attachment objects which are connecting these boxes together. So if I press play and simulate, the boxes are now connected within each other and they will not let go of these connections during the simulation. So you can build really nice structures or maybe connect joints or other things using this method. We will make this scene available in our samples section, so feel free to download it and play around with the parameters to see the attachment in action, how you can make these boxes behave in different ways. So the next feature that I wanted to show is our new simulation modes, and previously we only had one mode which allowed you to click on the simulation button, and during live simulation it would allow you to step forward the timeline and only evolve the physics simulation as long as you dragged it forward. So let me just quickly demonstrate this by creating a very simple scene, and I'll just create a quick sphere here that will drop onto my plane. So if I start my dynamic simulation and I drag my timeline forward, you can see that it simulates the sphere dropping down, and if I move my slider backwards, then nothing happens. So everything happens only when I move the slider forward. While this is nice, this might not be the behavior that you're looking for when you are trying to prepare your objects for simulation. So we have added 2 more simulation modes that you can access via the drop-down menu, and all you have to do to access them is click and hold the simulation button. So the topmost button is the one that we are most familiar with, and that's the incremental simulation. Then in the middle we have locked simulation, and finally we have real-time simulation. Let's look at the locked simulation. If I click on this, now when I drag the timeline, I also get real-time updates. But unlike the incremental simulation, now I can go backwards and it's going to log the state of the dynamic dynamics to be at the specific frame where the time slider is. So frame number 12, for example, will always produce you the same result regardless if you move forward or if you go back inside the simulation. And this is great for creating predictable results, and probably one of the most useful and recognizable mode of dealing with this type of things if you are used to working with particle flow. Additionally, this mode allows me to go back into the parameters of my simulated object. So for example, in this case, I can go back into the sphere primitive which generates this simulated sphere and edit those parameters. So I can increase the sphere size, or I can change the number of segments, and it will update the results for you in real time right away. I can also change the parameters of my simulation, so I can change the inflatable values. For example, I can change the pressure to have the ball blow up more, or I can go into my global flex settings and change things like gravity or add forces like cohesion or adhesion when you're simulating fluids. It is also very useful to play with the simulation parameters themselves, so you can change the number of sub-steps and you can see how it will affect your result inside your scene. And I will show some more of the locked animation features towards the end of this video. So the final simulation mode is the real-time simulation. So if I click on it, it's just going to simulate the scene at whichever frame you're on. So you can scrub the timeline, and if you have some animation going on, it's going to interact with your simulation. So this can be useful if you just want to quickly tweak the parameters of your simulated objects and you want to see them being simulated inside your scene without 3ds Max animation or controllers affecting Lucid's motion in any way. One obvious fun thing to play with in the locked simulation mode is the fluids, and if I scroll down as before, I can let my fluid simulate to some frame like 13, and then I can go back and play with the parameters of the Lucid components inside the scene. So for example, I can change the density of my fluid and right away see in the viewport how this reflects on the fluid at this particular frame. I can also go into my flex settings parameters and change things like cohesion of particles, which will make them stay together more, and I can increase my iterations and other parameters to modify the look of my fluid. So this is obviously useful if you are trying to achieve specific result with your fluid simulation and you don't want to keep pressing the simulate button to toggle its state, and instead you can play around with most of the parameters that are available to control the flex settings. It could also give you a lot more control when animating cloth. So in this example, I have my cloth falling onto a sphere and I can change the length and width segments to right away see how that will affect the overall look of my cloth. In fact, I can go and add an edit mesh or an edit poly modifier right below this, check the show cage parameter, and it's going to display me my original cloth, and I can start editing this mesh and right away see how the simulation will apply to this mesh and change it at this frame, which is 15 right now. This again gives you a lot more control and ability to play around with many different settings to fit the simulation to your particular needs for the result that you're trying to achieve. If you have any questions or comments regarding these features, please feel free to post in our Facebook page or on our forums, links to which are available in the description down below. Thank you very much for watching.